introducing the function of microlearning. So this part we've already seen earlier. Microlearning is short and focused on one particular objective, and our form should follow function. And to do this, we will start with our desired organizational result, which in turn will give us cues into the performance of our learners, which has to be improved. And then we drill down to the performance-based learning objectives. And as we saw earlier, we decide on the appropriate form for each performance-based learning objective, which is okay to be covered under microlearning. So in order to do this, there are a couple of sample discovery questions which will make this process a little easy and give us more insights. So these discovery questions, you can always have this conversation along with your stakeholders. That is the functional team from where you get the request for microlearning. So that is what in the design path, as you're seeing, microlearning, the need for microlearning always comes as a request or an opportunity. So our stakeholders from our functional training teams ask us for a microlearning asset, or when the situation is right, we take the opportunity to introduce them to the concept of microlearning. And then we come to the desired organizational results. So to help them pin down and give us accurate insights into that organizational result for which they want this particular training, we can ask them what the organizational desired results are, how they foresee this particular solution helping their teams and the organization, and what are the key performance indicators or metrics that this particular training, this particular microlearning asset would need to affect, and what is that impact they would expect. We can also ask them to fill in this blank that this solution will be successful if. So these are some sample discovery questions we can always ask our stakeholders to get accurate insights into our desired organizational results. So once we have answers to this, we move on to the second part of it, that is identifying the desired performance. Here again, we have a couple of sample discovery questions. The first one being, what do people have to do to achieve the organizational result, or to close the gap which we are currently seeing in performance? What is that people should be able to do more efficiently and effectively? We can also ask what top performers are doing. That will give us valuable insights into what the rest of the team should be doing, and thereby what should be captured in our training. Also, we should ask our stakeholders to describe proficiency. That will give us a lot of insights, maybe which are not very apparent. So having this conversation will bring all those hidden nuggets to light. Similarly, we could ask them what we would want to see people doing more or even less of, and what is that performance to be improved. With that, we move on to the third part of it, that is the actual performance-based learning objectives. And here again, we could ask our stakeholders what the specific focus area should be. While there could be several tasks, a few of them might be conducive to being designed as microlearning. So again, out of them, we should ask what are those critical tasks to be improved, which in turn will help us improve proficiency, or which in turn would help us help all the learners do what that top performer has been doing. So again, what should they address first? And what knowledge or skills would enable people to improve their performance? And of course, we can also get their insights on how frequently the task is performed, how important it is related to the other tasks learners have to do in their job, how easy or difficult it is to learn, and the risk associated with it. Because as we've seen earlier, this last question, the answers to this question will really give us insights on designing the microlearning asset. And then finally, once we have these questions answered, it's time to finalize the form. But there again, we have certain instructional considerations. The first one is, as we discussed earlier, it is understanding our target audience, the demographic experience. Are they blue-collared or white-collared employees? What is their level of familiarity and comfort with technology, with online-based training? Then the conditions and criteria under which they would be taking the training. Also, in the larger framework, where does this microlearning asset lie? Is it going to tie to some assessment? I mean, if they clear this assessment, will some new avenues of training, or will a new learning path open up to them? Or if they don't perform well in this microlearning, after this microlearning course, will they be sent back to maybe a more formal training session? So those are the factors to be considered. Then we also can take the type of content into consideration. So whether it's facts, concepts, principles, procedures, or processes, because we do have different ways of teaching each of these things. We won't go into details in this particular presentation, but we all know that for processes and steps, they have to be taught in a sequential manner, and if they're very complex, then maybe make it visual using graphics and images, whereas facts could be very dry and boring, so they will need a huge visual component to make them appealing. So the type of content will give us cues into the type of instructional activities we should use, and all these things will finally help us identify what the form of our microlearning asset should be. So is it a scenario-based module? Is it a simulation? Is it a video? Is it an infographic? Or is something as simple as a how-to guide which has a couple of instructions and the corresponding screenshots shown? Will that do the job? That is what we'll have to identify. And the last step is learning analytics. So once we have our asset ready and delivered to the learners via the LMS, we can always check the learning analytics, see how frequently the asset is being accessed, and the performance of learners after accessing the asset. Now, in some cases, this might not be very easy to track, but definitely today's LMSs do give us a lot of insights. So we can always go back and improve our learning solutions based on the results which we get from our LMS. So, and here's is just an example to make that the path very clear. So for one of our customers we worked with, it was an onboarding program, so they wanted to ensure employee satisfaction. That was a desired organizational result, so that new talented employees stay with the company, stay loyal, and reduce attrition rates. And the desired performance was to accelerate their time to proficiency and build competencies. And for that, the performance-based learning objective for they narrowed down for which they needed a microlearning asset was that the new hires should be able to recognize the support which is available to them, both in the form of their teammates and resources during the onboarding process itself. They should get a very clear idea because they had a huge list of resources available on the LMS. So after a lot of consulting and conversations with their stakeholders, we finally decided a form. It had to be very small so that it could be sent out in an email, because we did not want to overwhelm them by giving videos or something. They also wanted it to be very creative and have a storytelling approach. So finally we decided and designed a GIF which kind of shows a new hire sitting in his corner without knowing what to do, whom to approach, and then suddenly a whole lot of his teammates appear and talk to him, show him where he can access different things, and also where he can do the same on the LMS. So it was a GIF, very light. It could be sent over emails, and we also made sure that it had a creative narrative to it. So this is just one example of how we go from identifying the desired organizational results to the performance-based objective that has to be covered to microlearning, and actually zeroing in on the form of that microlearning asset. Now, here we have another poll, the last for today. What should the anchor point for microlearning be? Is it the software? Is it the format? Is it the learning objective? Or is it a video? Please launch the poll, and I request our participants to share their responses.
Yes, responses are coming in. Okay, we've got a fair amount of responses, so we'll be closing the poll in another 5 seconds. Okay, we've closed the poll, and here are the results. So the form or type is 25%, single objective
Okay.
67%, a 2-minute video 8%, and there are no responses for the development software.
Okay, thank you, Shiny. Thank you for the responses. And yes, most of us are correct. So the anchor point for microlearning should be the learning objective, because that in turn will determine the format and also thereby the development software and thereby the time.